Okay, we're going to be going into dreams again, and we're going to be continuing from where we left off, and probably starting with dream five of Jung's dreams, which is from about page 128. I'm really recommending that have a copy of this and have a look at the images and the text as we go through this because it's going to substantially enrich um, yeah, the experience of a viewer. Before I do that, I wanted to address a couple of little notes from what I was articulating previously about previous dreams. Like one of the first questions that I had was, why in reference to dream one, why are there transcendent qualities associated with the hat? If you remember, the dreamer is at a social gathering. On leaving, he puts on a stranger's hat instead of his own. Um, Jung is the one who sort of goes into the whole symbolism of the hat, and of the crown and of the halo. And it's like part of the same symbolic category, I'm going to say. So the idea is that material that comes from dreams is meaningful in some way rather than not meaningful. And it's like asking why the hat is associated with qualities of transcendence is kind of like asking why the halo or the crown are associated with these qualities. And their answer is what seems to be the case. Like that's been the case for a very long time. It's a symbol of the it's a symbol of enlightened consciousness. It's a symbol of divinity. It's a symbol of connection to the divine. And for a modern person dreaming a modern dream, um, the hat, in a sense, serves the function of that symbolic category. We could say that the significance of that symbolic category is underlying the manifestation of the hat. Um, anyway, Jung makes much of that. So this is just like clarifying what is it about the hat that has that. I guess like part of what Jung is trying to do is like taking the symbols which come in the dream and then like talking about what they mean. And to an extent, it's like drawing out, or Jung's word is amplifying. So it's like, yes, it's just a hat that appears in the dream. But if we want to, um, yeah, draw out in terms of like understanding the meaning of what the unconscious is trying to communicate, let's say, then amplifying meanings that we can find. Um, yeah, it's not an arbitrary meaning in any case. I wanted to address like what is the relevance of inundation by unconscious material in the third dream, in which whereby the seashore, the sea breaks into the land, flooding everything. Then the dreamer is sitting on a lonely island. What does it mean for um, there to be a flood? And obviously, like people have been trying to answer that question for a very long time. The flood myth is like the most widely dispersed myth cross-culturally around the world. And I guess like what we're trying to do here is not talk about this in theoretical or abstract, although that's definitely what's happening, but we're trying to understand what is the relevance of these symbols, of these yeah, mythical situations to our lives now, to our situation now. And the relevance of being flooded is like, what is that not what's going on in the world now? Is that like it's I mean it has a symbolic significance of entering any state of chaos, right? But I guess I'm thinking particularly in terms of the meta crisis and sort of humanity is being shown its dark underbelly by the widespread effects of artificial intelligence. To give one example, this is a way that being flooded by material of some kind. Like that's kind of what's going on now. I'd also say like all of us are immersed in far too much information that we can really process. Guilty of that. And this this symbol is an example of that. And it's particularly associated with quality of energy. So like um, the idea from Jung is that like when we start withdrawing our the energy from our relationships with objects and start having an internal conversation with different figures in the unconscious, let's say through for you almost like through active imagination, then there's a lot of energy that comes through that. It's like a restoration of energy that had been lost. And in a similar way, we can kind of see how if you imagine that the meta crisis, so like the sort of impending social collapse process around the world that is implied by radical breakdown of supply chains and economic system and like that. This is a way. This is like it's energizing. We hope there's a way where we're monkeys and we don't really get started until we're sort of backed into a corner, and we're very much being backed into a corner, and it's going to be, let's say, if there is that great simplification process that I think is reasonable to anticipate, it's going to be deeply energizing. And in that way, the physical or literal actual manifestation of these symbols um, have the same qualities as they do in symbolic terms. The and furthermore, like the idea there would be that there the idea would be that like it's a physical manifestation of sort of Mother Nature getting her revenge in the sense of like um, the Earth is like not very happy with our mistreatment um, in terms of like extraction and pollution, and there's a sort of um, let's say six continent interconnected global supply chain of single-use plastics and order it now and get it tomorrow. This is like not a very sustainable way of living, at least in terms of like um, how much energy we're using, let's say, in the developed West. And there's a way where, unless we sort of get it together and are capable of changing how we're treating the earth and how we're um, that, unless we can do that, then we're not going to be invited to stay any longer on the planet. And we can see how this sort of fits into the symbolic category of Mother Nature and the Great Mother, and how she is in a way challenging us by taking her revenge and flooding us and seeing if we can handle it, seeing if we can, yeah, hold on to ourselves while that process is ongoing. The third thing I wanted to address just briefly is what was important about the myth of the sirens, the myth of Odysseus. This is in relation to the fourth dream. The dream is surrounded by a throng of vague female forms. Voice within him says, "First, I must get away from father." Um, Again, this has like a quality of like that's what's happening now in the sense of so a throng of vague female forms. Well, this can just refer to like the multiplicity of all the material objects. So there's like there's a lot that's in front of us, and the idea from the dream here is that it's a kind of archetypal situation in which um, listening more deeply to what that quote throng of vague female forms, listening to what they have to say is the way forwards. The myth of Odysseus is sort of like a paradigmatic or archetypal myth which expresses that archetypal situation, I would say, um, which I addressed last time. I wanted to like mention I was reading this, which is called Mastery of Non-Mastery in the Age of Meltdown by an Australian anthropologist named Michael Taussig. And he talks about the myth of Odysseus in relation to Kafka, where he talks about how, if I'm getting this correctly, like the classic take is that um, Odysseus, if you remember, was like sort of exemplifying, like as per Homer, Odysseus was sort of exemplifying the cunning that was required for like proceeding with his quest, where he like fooled the sirens by um, you know, tying himself to the mast and being able to listen to their song without being totally infatuated. Uh, um, in Tausig's book, he talks about how Kafka had said that Homer had got it wrong, and what actually had happened was that the sirens whose song could penetrate anything, even the earplugs that Odysseus was wearing, actually stopped singing while he was passing by, and that Kafka claims that they did that because their silence was actually their greatest weapon. And the idea would be that Odysseus had actually sort of stuffed his own ears with wax, and was so sort of pleased with himself that he was not able to hear the silence of the sirens, which was kind of their um, yeah, their greatest weapon. And he was sort of the idea here is that Odysseus, rather than being a hero for his cunning, is actually so very full of himself and full of guile, full of like, oh, I outsmarted the sirens, kind of feeling very clever. And this itself was a kind of act that was held up to the sirens and the gods as a sort of shield that sort of protected him from um, being overwhelmed by libido-rich, energetically rich collected material. And I just thought that was a really fascinating reinterpretation of an ancient myth that was worth mentioning. We're going to go on now with Dream 5, which we mentioned. So from page 1 to 8. And I want to mention an important quality that's been emerging here, where we're sort of taking Jung's interpretation, but then like providing different commentary. Like we're not there's a quality of balance in relation to Jung here, where or moderation, you could say, where we want to listen to Jung and like be mindful of his authority in talking about mythological tropes and archetypal tropes, this sort of thing, but also not take Jung too seriously or not believe him too firmly. And Dream 5 describes this quality in a certain way. So Dream 5 is a visual impression. It goes, a snake describes a circle round the dreamer who stands rooted to the ground like a tree. Um, the idea here is that the snake is a symbol of the shadow, the dark side of the personality, and it is connected with self-determination and autonomy. And it sort of corresponds, symbolically speaking, to the individuality of the interpretation that one is offering. So there's a way that the the shadow, as symbolized by the snake, the quality of self-determination is affording or allowing passage through the dreams, through the series of interpretations that are available. Um, for example, what do I want to say about that? Um, yeah, it says that the snake describes a circle around the dreamer, meaning that Jung says of this circle that like the drawing of a spellbinding circle is an ancient magical device used by everyone who has a special or secret purpose in mind. He thereby protects himself from the perils of the soul that threaten him from without and attack anyone who is isolated by a secret. Yeah, the same procedure has also been used since olden times to set a place apart as holy and inviolable. And he goes on a bit. The name for this is a temenos, which is a Greek term. It's a taboo area where one's able to meet the unconscious. So the idea here is that by rooting oneself in one's individuality, by um, allowing oneself to be audaciously heroic enough to um, step into the idea of interpreting these texts from one's own place. This stance, this orientation allows one to proceed safely. That's what the dream is saying. Um, it's important in relation to figure 13, which we talked about as the tail-eating Ouroboros, as the prima materia, the first material of the alchemical process. And what this is essentially like, the snake is obviously also a symbol of this, but so is the spellbinding circle that is described by the snake. And basically what that means is that like by um, the Ouroboros is obviously also a symbol of God, let's say, what has been called God, or of in Neoplatonism what is called the One. It's a symbol of the transcendent, the divine, the ultimate, the tail-eating snake. And it's like when Dream 5 says that a snake describes a circle around the dreamer, who stands rooted to the ground like a tree. Well, it's by virtue of connection with that circle, standing within that circle, that the dreamer is able to proceed. Meaning that it's what this implies is that it's one's own individual connection with what is ultimate, what is most ultimate. That is, it's a crucial quality for allowing us to work through this. Um, I've written that the connection to the one, or faithfulness to that one, beyond, for example, idealization of Jung, allows one to see the way clearly and to forge a path through this thicket of interpretive brambles. So the idea is like being able to trust one's own connection to what is divine or sacred and not need to rely on Jung's connection is actually a critical quality that allows us to proceed because it allows us to properly place the different perspectives in a kind of competitive and collaborative tension. And if one didn't have one's own connection to what is divine or sacred or most high, however you want to talk about it, then that wouldn't be, that couldn't happen, essentially. It also corresponds with the advice of the conscience, the inner voice from Dream 4, which said, so there's a sense of trying to listen to the vague female forms, but we first need to get away from father. And the implication of that is not only that we need to get away from the spirit of traditional religion, let's say, or the rationalistic, I don't know, mindset of Western culture, something like that, but also from Jung, where like if we um, believed Jung and followed Jung too closely here, we would be blinding ourselves and not able to listen more deeply to um, we wouldn't be in the position of the dreamer in Dream 5. We wouldn't be standing in our own protected space. The snake, our shadow, our individuality, or our autonomy would not have described a sacred circle around us that protects us from the influence of anyone else. Just checking if there's anything else that I want to read from that. It's a reframing of the idea of isolation as well. So, like before, we talked about how isolation in connection with secret keeping is something that, like, when we start on the hero's journey, we go away from everyone and into our solitude, into isolation, and this is like dangerous. And it's not just dangerous; it's terrifying. And this Dream 5 allows us to reframe that so that, as Jung says, the isolation, so uncanny before, is now endowed with meaning and purpose, and thus robbed of its terrors. So the idea here is that um, in some way, being forced to be with oneself and to wrestle with one's own um, internality, one's own inner world. In some way, this process consists of shadow integration, and although that process is terrifying, it also gives meaning and purpose to one's own individual life, let's say. And there's actually like certain affordances that come from that, where one is able to stand safely within um, the sacred taboo space that is derived from that individuality. So it's not only horrible, the isolation, it's also meaningful. And specifically involves a connection with the transcendent, um, like by it's by standing within the circle that is drawn by the snake, by the shadow side. What am I connecting here? It's that the snake as a symbol of the shadow. The snake is a symbol of both the shadow and the Ouroboros, both of which are important here. Um, Totally fine for the snake to be a symbol of both of those things. When it says, even when it says the snake describes a circle, it's like the snake is the circle. I'm thinking of the image that I'm thinking of is from the movie of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, where if you remember when Harry was trying to get into the chamber, there are these snakes that describe a circle around the entrance door. It's the same sort of thing. It's like um, there's a way that safely proceeding through the following series of dreams not only um, requires one to connect more deeply with one's own individuality, autonomy, self-determination with the shadow, which is connected to all of those qualities, according to Jung, but that doing so also allows one to stand rooted within one's own connection to the divine. Yeah, this is a sort of f- phylogenetic or historical analogy to Eden, which I'm just going to go briefly through. It doesn't have to take too much of your time. So, in the fall from Eden, it was the snake that caused them to eat the fruit and to see and then fall. So there's a falling into historicity. There's a falling into the individuality of humanness, falling away from God, let's say. And it was the snake that triggered this literally process of individuation. Um, yeah, so there's a way that like this is pointing to the important step of shadow integration as a way to proceed through the following. It also then like doing so, like completing that step of like developing a more intimate relationship with the shadow, let's say, then unveils the anima, which we can see in Dream Six, which immediately follows. Um, Dream Six, the veiled figure of a woman seated on a stair. I'm actually going to stop and come back because I feel not really able to talk about this with sufficient depth right now. So see you later.